My beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, I begin by saying Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Let me ask you a question today. What would you stand for, if you knew your life depended on it? Would you choose comfort and silence, or would you rise for truth, even if it meant pain and sacrifice? One of the most powerful and heart-shaking examples we have in our history is that of Imam Hussain ibn Ali N.R.A., the beloved grandson of the Prophet Muhammad N., a man who didn't just live Islam, he died to preserve it. Imam Hussain R.A. was not just a man of noble lineage, he was a man of unwavering courage and principle. When the entire political system around him bent to the will of an unjust ruler, he stood alone without hesitation. The Ummah had started to slip into darkness. Fear had taken over hearts, and the truth was being silenced by threats and power. In such a time, to stand for justice was not just difficult, it was dangerous. Yet Imam Hussain R.A. did not wait for the world to agree with him. He did not look around to see how many would support him. He knew the path of truth is often lonely, and he chose that path with full awareness of its cost. He received letters from people asking him to come to Kufa and lead them. But when he saw that their loyalty was weak and their fear was strong, he did not abandon his mission. Even when he was left with only a small group of loyal companions and family, he did not retreat. This is the kind of bravery and clarity that only those who are deeply connected to Allah possess. Imam Hussain R.A. knew that numbers don't define the strength of a movement. Truth does. He understood that success is not in worldly victory, but in being firm upon righteousness, even if you are the only one standing. The day of Ashura teaches us that being right is more important than being popular. In every era, there are people who will try to silence the truth for power, position, and comfort. But the legacy of Karbala reminds us that we are never truly alone when we are on the side of truth. Because Allah is with the just, Imam Hussain R.A. became a symbol for all time, not because he won a worldly battle, but because he never let falsehood overpower him, even if it cost him everything. In our lives, we face moments where standing up for what is right may isolate us. We might lose friends, face criticism, or suffer setbacks. But if we remember the courage of Imam Hussain R.A., we will find the strength to stand firm, and knowing that standing alone for truth is more honorable than joining the crowd in silence and submission. Imam Hussain R.A. could have remained silent when Yazid took control of the Muslim Ummah. He could have chosen a life of safety, comfort, and ease by simply staying quiet and avoiding conflict. But he knew that silence in the face of injustice is not an act of wisdom. It is an act of betrayal. Islam teaches us to stand for what is right, even if the cost is great. When injustice becomes common and people begin to accept it, the voice of truth becomes even more important. Imam Hussain R.A. understood that by staying silent, he would be indirectly approving the oppression and misguidance that Yazid's rule represented. Injustice, when not confronted, spreads like a disease. It weakens the morals of society and allows the powerful to abuse the weak. Imam Hussain R.A. did not rise to gain control or rule over people. He rose because the values of Islam, the values taught by his grandfather Prophet Muhammad N., were being threatened. He saw the Ummah heading toward corruption, where leadership was no longer about justice and piety but about control and fear. He knew that if he remained silent, future generations would accept this distortion as part of Islam. Therefore, he chose to become the voice of resistance, even though it meant facing certain death. This decision was not made out of impulse. It was deeply rooted in his faith in Allah and his commitment to the truth. He refused to give allegiance to Yazid, because that would have meant legitimizing a corrupt system. By speaking out, Imam Hussain R.A. awakened the conscience of the Muslim world. His refusal to be silent became a powerful message that echoed far beyond the battlefield of Karbala. It reached the hearts of believers throughout history and taught them that the truth must always be spoken, no matter the cost. Even today, many people fear speaking against wrong due to pressure, fear of backlash, or loss of reputation. But Karbala reminds us that silence can sometimes be a bigger sin than speaking out. Imam Hussain R.A. proved that a single voice raised for justice can shake the foundations of tyranny. His sacrifice teaches us to be brave, to be truthful, and to never let fear silence our moral responsibility. That is the true sunnah of standing for justice. When Imam Hussain R.A. saw the state of leadership in the Muslim Ummah, he recognized that the principles laid down by the Prophet Muhammad were being violated. Leadership in Islam is a sacred trust, not a position of luxury or control. It is a duty that comes with responsibility, justice, and service to the people. But under Yazid, leadership had turned into a dynasty, where power was inherited without regard for piety, character, or competence. Imam Hussain R.A. could not accept this change silently because it went against everything the Prophet had taught. The Prophet demonstrated leadership through humility, fairness, and love for the people. He led by example and feared Allah in every decision he made. The rightly guided caliphs who followed him upheld these values. But now, the leadership was being taken over by force and fear, not by the will of the people or the guidance of the Quran and Sunnah. Yazid's character was widely known to be corrupt. He indulged in sinful activities and did not embody the qualities of a true Islamic leader. Giving allegiance to such a ruler would not only validate his leadership, but also open the door for future generations to follow the same corrupted path. Imam Hussain refused to support a system that had deviated so far from the prophetic example. He understood that if Yazid's rule was accepted without challenge, the very foundation of Islamic governance would collapse. People would start believing that Islam allows unjust rulers, and the line between right and wrong would become blurred. His refusal was not political. It was spiritual and moral. It was a call to return to the real meaning of leadership in Islam, to serve the people, uphold justice, and fear Allah above all else. This act of standing against a corrupt ruler was a reminder that every believer has a responsibility to question authority when it strays from the path of righteousness. Imam Hussain sacrificed everything to preserve the dignity of Islamic leadership. He reminded the Ummah that leadership is not about wearing crowns. It is about carrying the weight of the people's trust with honesty and humility. His stance was not for fame or rebellion, but for reforming a system that had lost its soul. And that is why his sacrifice remains a shining example of true Islamic leadership for all time. Imam Hussain knew from the beginning that his journey to Karbala would not end in worldly victory. He understood the danger, the numbers, and the reality of the situation. Yet he still chose to move forward because his mission was never about personal safety. It was about the survival of truth. His sacrifice was for the greater good of the Muslim Ummah. He gave up not just his life, but the lives of his beloved companions, his brothers, his nephews, and even his 6-month-old son. This level of sacrifice is unimaginable for most people, but Imam Hussain did it with full sincerity and submission to the will of Allah. He believed that if the truth required blood to stay alive, then his blood was the first that must be offered. Karbala was never about political control. It was about protecting the message of Islam from distortion. Imam Hussain could not sit by while Yazid misrepresented the faith and used his power to destroy the values of justice, honesty, and mercy. By sacrificing his life, Imam Hussain shook the conscience of the Muslim world. He gave the Ummah a clear example that sometimes the price of preserving Islam is paid in blood, not words. This kind of sacrifice is only possible when a person is deeply connected to Allah. Imam Hussain did not act out of anger or revenge. He was calm, composed, and focused even on the day of Ashura. His heart was filled with the love of Allah and a commitment to truth. He knew that people might misunderstand his actions, but he also knew that Allah would never let a sincere sacrifice go to waste. And indeed, his martyrdom became a turning point in Islamic history. The impact of his sacrifice is felt even today. His stand continues to inspire millions around the world to live with courage and to never compromise on their principles. He taught us that the real value of life lies not in how long we live, but in what we stand for. Imam Hussain stood for the truth, and in doing so, he ensured that the light of Islam would never be extinguished. His sacrifice was not a loss, it was the greatest victory for the soul of the Ummah. Imam Hussain made it clear through his actions that dignity and honor are more valuable than life itself. When Yazid demanded allegiance, Imam Hussain could have easily accepted it and lived in peace, enjoying the comforts and privileges that came with submission. But for him, compromising with falsehood and accepting humiliation under a corrupt ruler was never an option. He famously said, "Death with dignity is better than a life of disgrace." This statement alone reflects the depth of his character and the strength of his faith. He taught the Ummah that real honor lies in standing firm upon principles. Even if the price is death, he did not rise to seek power, revenge, or political dominance. He rose because he could not live under a rule that insulted the core values of Islam. Yazid's leadership was based on fear, corruption, and selfishness, whereas Islam teaches justice, humility, and service to others. Imam Hussain recognized that if he gave allegiance to Yazid, it would not just be a personal act, it would be seen as approval from the family of the Prophet. This would mislead the entire Ummah and send a dangerous message that Islam accepts tyranny if it benefits personal safety. He chose to endure thirst, hunger, and pain in the scorching desert of Karbala, but he did not let go of his dignity and principles for even a moment. His actions speak to all generations that honor and self-respect should never be traded for comfort. In today's world, many people sacrifice their values for material gain, fear of loss, or social acceptance. Imam Hussain R.A. reminds us that a life without integrity is empty, no matter how comfortable it may appear. He lived and died to prove that a believer should never bow to injustice, no matter how strong the enemy or how severe the threat. The message of Imam Hussain R.A. is timeless. It urges every Muslim to carry themselves with dignity, to speak the truth even when it's unpopular, and to choose the path of honor over the path of compromise. His legacy is not just about a historical event. It is a living example of how one man's refusal to live in disgrace changed the course of history and inspired generations to uphold truth with unshakable courage. The tragedy of Karbala is not just a historical event that happened more than 300 years ago. It is a timeless reminder for the entire Ummah about standing for truth and resisting injustice. Imam Hussain R.A. and his small group of companions faced a massive army with full awareness that they were likely heading toward death. Yet they did not retreat. Their stance wasn't meant for their own time only. It was meant to echo through every generation. Karbala continues to inspire because the values it represents, truth, courage, sacrifice, and faith, are needed in every era, especially when falsehood gains power and injustice becomes widespread. In every age, societies face challenges where power is misused, truth is silenced, and morality is compromised. When such times come, people often feel helpless or choose to remain silent for the sake of peace. But Karbala teaches that silence in the face of wrong is dangerous. It shows us that it only takes a few people with unwavering belief to stand up and protect the truth. Imam Hussain R.A. did not wait for the majority to support him. He stood firm with his family and loyal companions and trusted in Allah's wisdom. That message alone is a guiding light for believers today. The relevance of Karbala also lies in its emotional and spiritual power. When people hear the story of Imam Hussain R.A. and his sacrifices, their hearts are moved. Tears are shed not only out of sorrow, but out of admiration for the strength of faith he showed. His actions awaken the conscience of those who have become distant from their values and encourage them to reflect on their own lives. Karbala urges us to ask ourselves, are we standing for what is right? Are we resisting injustice in our homes, communities, and societies? Imam Hussein's MRA message is not limited to scholars or leaders, it is for every Muslim, young or old. His stand calls us to live lives of truthfulness, dignity, and fear of Allah, no matter what the cost. He proved that even in defeat, there is a victory if the cause is noble and the intention is sincere. His sacrifice remains a light in the darkness, a lesson in every hardship, and a call to action whenever falsehood rises. The legacy of Karbala lives because it was built on the eternal truth of Islam and the unbreakable faith of one man who refused to surrender to injustice.